Right. So today we're going to be talking about 9/11.
Yeah.
I mean, a day that obviously everyone remembers where they were.
Right.
But we're going to be going beyond that. We're going beyond kind of just the surface of where we were on that day and really diving deep into like the why and the how behind it.
Yeah.
And we're using this source called the World Trade Center attacks, a comprehensive analysis of the events, causes, and global impact to guide our deep dive today.
Sounds good.
And yeah, so I mean, this is one where you're really going to need your thinking caps because it's not just about the timeline of what happened.
Right.
It's really about all these historical currents that led us to that moment and the ripples, that we're still dealing with today.
It's interesting you mentioned that because it's fascinating how much the Cold War's shadow kind of hangs over 9/11.
Really?
It's a connection people might not make immediately.
I think that would have been my first thought.
Yeah.
To connect those two.
Right.
What's the link?
Well, it goes back to the Soviet-Afghan War in the 80s.
Right.
So you've got the U.S. in the middle of the Cold War backing the Afghan Mujahideen who are fighting the Soviets.
Yeah.
Enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of thing.
Yeah, totally.
Right. And so that's the setup. But how does this tie back to 9/11?
Yeah. How does that connect?
Well, a young Osama bin Laden was part of the Mujahideen.
Wow.
Back then, the U.S. saw him as an ally.
Ah.
So the U.S. was indirectly supporting him.
Oh.
But this involvement in the region, you could say it was well-intentioned at the time.
Yeah.
But it had some serious unintended consequences.
Okay, so this is where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
You're saying that, like, our involvement in Afghanistan inadvertently kind of helped create the conditions for al-Qaeda to emerge.
That's exactly right.
Wow.
Bin Laden's transformation from, U.S. ally to sworn enemy and the rise of al-Qaeda was fueled by this complex mix of factors, right?
Yeah.
You've got radical interpretations of Islam. You've got the sense of U.S. interference in the Muslim world.
Right.
And this deep resentment towards the West in general.
Okay.
All these things are swirling around. It's not simple.
Right, and it wasn't just talk, right? Like, al-Qaeda was already making itself known before 9/11 even happened.
They were active.
Yeah.
Think about the 1993 World Trade Center bombing,
Oh, really?
the U.S. Embassy bombings in Africa in 1998, the attack on the USS Cole in 2000. I mean, these weren't just isolated incidents.
Right.
These were calculated acts of terror.
So you're saying that there was a goal in mind.
Absolutely.
It wasn't just about causing destruction.
There was a message.
Yeah.
Al-Qaeda's ideology. And this comes out in the source material.
Right.
They saw the U.S. as this global power interfering in the Muslim world. So these attacks were meant to send a message. We are here and we will strike back.
It's chilling.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's scary stuff.
It is scary stuff. It's the reality we were living in, though,
Yeah. And that they were setting the stage for something bigger. I mean,
it's just a pattern.
It's wild.
It's a pattern of escalation. And then 9/11 happens.
Yeah.
September 11, 2001.
It's hard to believe it's been that long.
I know.
When you say it out loud.
It's crazy. And when you really go back and you look at the details of the 9/11 attacks, it's just chilling how much planning went into it.
It's almost hard to comprehend.
I know.
Like how someone could plan something so horrific in such detail.
It's a really disturbing thought.
It is.
That someone could be so calculated.
Yeah.
But our source talks about the 19 hijackers.
Okay.
Most of them from Saudi Arabia.
Right.
And they were radicalized and trained in al-Qaeda camps in Afghanistan.
Yeah, it's just wild to me how ideology can have that much power over people.
I know.
Like you said, they were trained.
Yeah.
So they weren't necessarily hardened criminals beforehand.
That's what's so scary about it. Right. You had these seemingly ordinary guys. Some of them were educated. Yeah. They had what we might even call westernized lifestyles, but they were drawn in by this ideology.
It's frightening.
It is. And then you look at the timeline of the attacks, it's like clockwork.
It's eerie how precise it was.
It really is.
Like they knew exactly what they were doing.
They had a plan.
Yeah.
And they stuck to it.
So walk us through it then.
Okay, so it all starts at 8:46 a.m. Eastern Time.
Okay.
When American Airlines Flight 11 crashes into the North Tower of the World Trade Center.
I remember seeing those images on TV.
It was unbelievable.
The smoke, the fire, the utter disbelief.
I know. And you have to remember,
Yeah.
the World Trade Center, those towers,
They were huge.
They were architectural marvels.
Yeah.
Designed to withstand incredible forces.
Right, you'd think it could withstand anything.
You would, but this was different.
Yeah.
The impact happened between the 93rd and 99th floors.
Oh, wow.
Sending shockwaves through the city.
And the
whole world felt it.
Yeah.
And then just 17 minutes later at 9:03 a.m.
It's crazy how quick it was.
I know.
Everything happened so fast.
United Airlines Flight 175, also from Boston, also heading to Los Angeles, hits the South Tower.
And this was broadcast live.
Oh, yeah. The whole world was watching.
I remember that.
It was the moment everyone realized
Love that
this was no accident.
Yeah.
This was a coordinated attack.
A deliberate act of terror.
Exactly.
It's hard to put into words the feeling.
It was surreal.
Yeah.
Like something out of a movie.
It felt unreal.
It did.
And the impact on the South Tower.
Between the 77th and 85th floors.
Wow.
So many people were trapped above the fire.
I can't even imagine.
Our source talks about the chaos,
Yeah.
the first responders rushing in, people trying to evacuate.
Just terrifying.
Absolute terror.
And while all of this is happening, a third plane, American Airlines Flight 77, crashes into the Pentagon.
At 9:37 a.m.
Oh, wow. I almost forgot about that.
It's easy to overlook.
With everything else going on.
Because of the magnitude of the World Trade Center.
Right.
But it's important to remember
that
184 people died at the Pentagon that day.
You're right. We have to remember them, too.
Absolutely.
It really puts into perspective the scale of the attacks.
It wasn't just New York.
Yeah.
It was a national tragedy.
And then, of course, there's the fourth plane.
United Airlines Flight 93.
Right.
That crashed in Pennsylvania.
A very different story.
A story of courage.
Yeah.
Of resistance.
When I think about the passengers on that flight,
I know.
it still gives me chills.
They're heroes.
They are.
They knew about the other attacks.
Yeah.
And they fought back.
It's hard to fathom the kind of bravery that took.
You know, it's unbelievable.
Knowing they were probably going to die.
Facing their own mortality.
And they still fought back.
They saved lives.
They did?
They prevented another catastrophe.
They're true heroes.
Their story is a testament to the human spirit.
It really is. It's just such a heavy thing to think about, you know?
Yeah.
The human cost.
Nearly 3,000 people.
From all over the world, too.
Over 90 countries.
It's just unfathomable.
It's easy to get lost in the numbers.
Right.
But each one of those numbers was a person.
Right.
With a family, with friends, with dreams.
Yeah. And dreams that were shattered.
Exactly. And it wasn't just on that day either.
That's true.
The source talks about the long-term impact.
Right. The hidden cost.
The things people don't see.
The things that linger.
The first responders, for example.
Yeah, they went through so much.
Thousands of them still deal with health problems.
Of that day.
Directly related to 9/11.
Like what?
Respiratory illnesses, cancers, things like that.
Because of the air quality.
The toxic debris at ground zero.
Right, of course.
It's a reminder that the effects of that day are still being felt.
Absolutely. And the economic impact, too?
Yeah. How do you even begin to measure something like that?
Yeah, exactly. It's massive.
The source talks about the immediate aftermath. Lower Manhattan, the financial heart of the U.S., was devastated.
Just devastated.
The losses were astronomical.
And it wasn't just the U.S.
No, the whole world felt it.
Global markets.
Everything.
It's crazy how quickly everything just stopped.
The world kind of stood still.
Yeah, it's like everyone was holding their breath.
And then there was this outpouring of support.
Right, from everywhere.
All around the world.
People were united.
It was a unique moment.
I remember seeing images of vigils, memorials.
It was a global response.
That's such a horrific event.
World leaders condemned the attacks.
Yeah, they offered support.
NATO even invoked Article 5.
Really?
For the first and only time.
Wow, so an attack on one was an attack on all.
Exactly.
That's huge.
It was a turning point.
Yeah, and it really set the stage for what came next.
The war on terror.
Right, this global campaign against terrorism.
Led by the U.S.
And it all started with Afghanistan.
Right, the invasion of Afghanistan.
Just weeks after the attack.
The goal was to dismantle al-Qaeda.
And remove the Taliban.
Who were harboring them.
And at first it seemed like a success.
Right, a quick victory. It became clear that this was going to be a long and complex fight.
It dragged on.
And it expanded.
Beyond Afghanistan.
The war on terror went global.
With all the controversies that came with it.
Guantanamo Bay, the Patriot Act.
Right, these huge debates about security versus freedom.
How far do we go?
How much are we willing to sacrifice?
These are questions we're still grappling with today.
And then there's Iraq.
Yeah. The Iraq War.
A controversial chapter.
To say the least.
The link to 9/11 is still debated.
The Bush administration justified the invasion.
By saying Saddam Hussein had WMDs.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Which were never found.
Right.
And the consequences of that war.
Still being felt today.
The instability, the rise of ISIS.
It's a mess.
It really shows the ripple effect of 9/11.
How one event can have such far-reaching consequences.
It's like a chain reaction.
Exactly, and it changed the way the U.S. operates in the world. Well, before 9/11, the U.S. felt secure.
Geographically isolated.
But 9/11 shattered that sense of security.
We were vulnerable.
And that led to a shift in foreign policy.
Towards a more aggressive stance.
Exactly. Preemptive strikes increased military spending.
The war on terror changed everything.
It did.
And what about here at home?
Domestically.
Yeah. How did 9/11 change us?
Well, for one thing, it led to a massive increase in security measures.
Like what?
The creation of the Department of Homeland Security.
Right.
The TSA airport security.
Yeah, it's definitely not as easy to travel as it used to be.
No, it's not.
And surveillance, too, right?
Oh, yeah. Cameras everywhere. Data collection.
It's the price of security.
Some would say so, but it's a trade-off.
Between security and freedom.
Exactly.
It's a tough balance to strike.
It is, and it's something we need to keep talking about.
Absolutely, because the threat of terrorism hasn't gone away.
No, it hasn't. If anything, it's evolved.
That's a whole other deep dive.
Right.
Maybe we'll save that for another time.
Sounds good.
But yeah, I mean, this has been heavy.
It is a heavy topic.
But important to talk about.
Absolutely.
9/11 was a turning point in history.
It changed the world.
And we're still living with the consequences.
Every single day.
Well said. All right, that's going to do it for our deep dive on 9/11.
Until next time.
Keep those thinking caps on, folks. We'll be back soon with another deep dive.